Good evening, my News Midday TV family. Welcome back to the channel for another news update. And in the news this evening, Duda's Coke nephew killed in biker crash. Lester Coke, the nephew of the notorious West Kingston Don Christopher Duda's Coke, who was extradited to the United States, where he is currently serving a 23-year sentence in a federal prison, was killed in a crash on Friday. Reports are that the younger Coke, the son of Mark Anthony Coke, aka Jati, was turning into Tivoli on a bike when he collided with a taxi. He was pronounced dead at the Kingston Public Hospital. The incident has caused some tension in downtown Kingston, leading to roadblocks being mounted in some areas. The police are on high alert. Dad of man in prison and the Don get life sentences. Two men, one a reputed Don from rural St. Andrew and the other the father of an incarcerated man, who were convicted for possession of, dealing in, and trafficking prohibited weapons and ammunition, were on Monday slapped with multiple life sentences by Supreme Court Judge Justice Vaughn Smith for their crimes. The two, Romario Cunningham and Courtney Roden, were among a group of 4 men rounded up by cops in November 2023 during an intelligence-led operation following a tip indicating that weapons were going to be transported from Linstead, St. Catherine to a location in St. Andrew on the day in question. Detectives assigned to the Counterterrorism and Organized Crime Investigation Branch of the Jamaica Constabulary Force tracked the Toyota Probox in which Roden, who is in his 60s, was a passenger, to the compound of a hardware store in Mona, St. Andrew, where he handed over a bag which was found to contain a semi-automatic rifle with no serial number and a magazine with 21 cartridges to Cunningham and another man who were in a Toyota Noah. After the exchange, a covert team which had watched and recorded the transaction on camera gave a signal which resulted in the police teams in unmarked vehicles swooping down and arresting the men and seizing the firearm and ammunition. Following a trial in May, in which the cases against the 2 of the men collapsed for lack of evidence, Cunningham, the reputed Don, was sentenced to 15 years at hard labor for possession of a prohibited weapon, life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 15 years for unauthorized possession of ammunition, and life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 20 years for dealing in prohibited weapons. Those sentences were ordered to run concurrently, making it so that he will spend the longest of the 3, life without the possibility of parole, until after 20 years. Roden, the father of an incarcerated man who is the owner of the gun which was being taken to Cunningham, was sentenced to 15 years at hard labor with eligibility for parole after 10 years for the possession of prohibited weapon charge. He was also sentenced to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 15 years for unauthorized possession of ammunition. He was slapped with a second life sentence with eligibility for parole after 20 years for the charge of trafficking prohibited weapons, and a third life sentence with eligibility for parole after 20 years for the dealing in prohibited weapons charge. The sentences will, however, run concurrently, meaning that Roden, who is in his 60s, will serve the longest of the 4 before he is able to apply for parole. The matter was heard in the Gun Court Division of the Home Circuit Court in downtown Kingston over 5 days. A source with knowledge of the case told the news that Cunningham had set eyes on taking over full leadership of the St. Andrew community where he lived, but ruled the fact that no one would take orders from him. So he called for the firearm which belonged to an incarcerated man because he intended to exact a vicious takeover. The incarcerated man asked Roden, which is his father, to take the firearm to Pepin. That is why the firearm was being exchanged. Cunningham was already a Don, but he wanted more powerful firepower to exact the takeover, the source said. All 4 men involved in that exchange were arrested that day and charged. However, during the trial, Justice Smith, after considering the evidence, said even though detectives had captured the takeover on camera, it wasn't sufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the other 2 men were really involved. The 2 who had been on bail were eventually acquitted. However, Cunningham and Roden were never given bail and were each found guilty and subsequently sentenced. Justice Smith went further to commend the investigator, Detective Sergeant Cleon Ferron of the Counterterrorism and Organized Crime Investigation Branch for an investigation well done, outlining that the detective was thorough in pulling the evidence on the convicted men together. Jamaican British actor Michael Ward charged by UK police with rape and sexual assault. British actor Michael Ward has been charged with rape and sexual assault, police said Friday. The 27-year-old faces 2 counts of rape and 3 counts of sexual assault, the Metropolitan Police Force said. The charges relate to 1 woman, and the offenses reportedly took place in January 2023. Ward denied the charges and said in a statement that he has full faith that his name will be cleared in court. He is due to appear at London's Thames Magistrates Court on August 28. Ward has appeared in films including Blue Story, The Book of Clarence, and the recently released American political satire Eddington. In 2020, he won the Rising Star Award at the British Academy Film Awards, or BAFTAs. He was nominated for an acting BAFTA for Sam Mendes' Empire of Light and for a BAFTA Television Award for the Steve McQueen-directed series Small Axe. Garbage pile raises concern at the St. Joseph's Hospital. A pile of garbage has been seemingly sitting for weeks inside the St. Joseph's Hospital in Kingston, raising concerns among staff and the patients at the medical facility. Black garbage bags and white ones and cardboard boxes with flies were strewn along one of the hospital's roadways leading to some wards. The buildings stand meters from the filth. The pile is not comprised of medical waste, which would have been an even greater concern, the hospital's CEO, Dr. Christopher Monroe, stated on Friday. He said it was ordinary waste that had accumulated, having not been collected due to technical issues with the contracted garbage collector. The matter is being attended to. It's not our fault at the St. Joseph's Hospital why it is not yet being collected, Monroe told the news on Friday morning. The people who are to collect it are having some technical issues. Everything on our side has already been procured, and they have been given the green light to pick up. It is not from our end. Monroe did not disclose the name of the private contractor and declined to say for how long the garbage has been uncollected. With regard to potential health problems from the heap, Monroe said if there were any concerns, the garbage would not be there. He could not say whether garbage will be collected. In the meantime, Audley Gordon, Executive Director of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, explained that generally, garbage collection at hospitals is done by private contractors. The NSWMA only steps in during emergencies. He could not say whether the entity was contacted regarding the situation at the St. Joseph's. In emergencies, I remember one time at a KPH, there was an issue with their private collector and we were called in. St. Joseph's has also done that already. So we do get those kinds of calls, but it's not often, said Gordon. This is not different from other entities who would have called us from time to time to do a trip or two because they are having issues with their contractors, he explained. Thank you everyone for watching. See you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. for another news update.